There is something remarkably paradoxical about human nature. Everyone craves freedom. They all desire a strong sense of self, independence, and autonomy. But at the same time, often upon the slightest feeling of resistance relative to our surroundings, people choose conformity. They abandon their sense of self. They stop trusting their intuition and their connection to who they are, and instead they choose the path of simply fitting into the environment. This mechanism of becoming a social chameleon in any situation that endangers your sense of self leads to what I believe is one of the most dangerous symptoms of a narcissistic society. This is the aspect of the human psyche which chooses total abolition of personal knowing in light of the need to fit in. And because of this, we have so many people choosing to distrust their genuine sense of self. That includes their feelings, their needs, their intuition, their heart's consciousness, and even common sense. Because every social experiment that's been ever done on conformity has shown that people are willing to give up even the most rational sense of behavior as soon as somebody else defies that way of thinking. One of the most telling examples of this was revealed in the 1950s in the Solomon Asch experiment, where subjects were shown a set of 3 lines. And in a lineup of other people that were actually actors, but the subject thought were all participants of the same study, they were asked to select, of these 3 lines, the one that matched a subject line of a certain length. So the answer is clearly apparent. No one with a rational mind could get that wrong. However, simply because all of these actors in the study started blurting out the wrong line, the test subject started to do the same. So simply, this is a case of a subject abandoning their own truth, choosing to not lean into what they know is the obviously right answer because everyone else is doing something different. There are so many other examples of this. Some others are the Stanford prison experiment, in which we can see the effect of conformity in terms of changing roles. So when people were meant to play the role of a prison guard or a prisoner, they start to actually adapt to the behaviors of either the inmates or the guards. They start to act in ways that totally modifies their original personality simply because they start to abide by a new standard, a new social norm, abandoning their sense of self and rights and wrongs in order to play in with this group conformity. Another jarring example of this was the Milgram experiment, in which the test was to see how people would respond to the desire to conform in a situation in which that conformity could actually prove lethal. The test subject was said to administer light shocks to somebody in a testing room. And after each of those shocks was administered, the pain level actually went up with each of them. So they would see that the actor that was receiving the shocks was responding with more and more pain, screaming, and seeing that eventually they were said to administer a shock that would actually be above and beyond the possible threshold for a safe response. That last shock was supposed to be lethal, and most subjects in this experiment actually went through with it because the person telling them to administer them said they had to go ahead and do that. It's absolutely terrifying to think of the kind of things that people will do simply to conform, because someone else told them that's the way to go, or because everybody in a certain room or setting is conforming to a certain order or command. This desire to conform is something that we naturally do to avoid experiencing painful opposition. Think of it. If you're in any kind of a setting in which you choose differently, we automatically feel like there's something off in our own choice, because we have a sort of bias that we prescribe to ourselves if we end up choosing differently from everybody else. This is part of some kind of evolutionary advantage, natural selection, if you will, allowing us to stay more strong when we're choosing to play into a group selection. However, when it comes to our everyday lives, this innate desire to conform can lead to tremendous damage, both for ourselves and for others, because in choosing to conform, we're choosing to give up the part of us that actually defends truth when nobody else is watching. The part of us that knows that there is a moral imperative to siding with our intuition, to trusting our hearts, to feeling into the moral ethics that are underlying any given situation and choosing to go along with those rather than the thing that everyone else is choosing to do. Collective thinking, or the groupthink mentality, is particularly appealing because it offers a solution for people that don't have the ability to think for themselves. It provides a sort of cheat code for life, because always choosing to look to your neighbor or to your surroundings to form a decision about yourself or reality as a whole is a bit like cheating on a test in school. It's a moment in which you haven't actually prepared for the school of life, and so you choose to simply go with whatever is the consensus in your surroundings. Another way to look at groupthink is as hive mind consciousness. It's a way of thinking in which your consciousness actually becomes a part of the one. This is a way that AI is actually allowing for people's consciousness to be fueling a larger field of intention. Every time somebody's uploading their data, their questions, their information, or personal data into an AI kind of a system, what's happening is that consciousness is actually learning from the collective that is fueling it to become more conscious. We are creating a larger egregore of collective intention by choosing to become as one with this collective. However, this kind of hive mind consciousness is actually inorganic in nature. We're not talking about the one field, which is already existing in a state of coherence. This field that is the quantum field, or the one unified source from which everything arises. This kind of egregore is more of a psychic entity which traps souls in an experience that is limited in nature. It's an experience that is devoted to only one expression of source consciousness, whether that is choosing to follow only a set of certain beliefs, religious ideals, certain moral principles, choosing to see only through the lens of that conformity as opposed to seeing the big picture. In a way, we can say that what we are brought up with is a form of hive mind consciousness. Learning to only respond to what our parents taught us is the truth is hive mind consciousness. Going to school and trusting only in what our teachers taught and what the textbooks have revealed is a form of hive mind consciousness. Choosing to trust only religious models that we were exposed to, or trusting these certain spiritual gurus or individuals along our path that chose to evoke only one version of the truth, is us submitting to hive mind consciousness. This concept of the hive mind is us being subjected to just one way of thinking or being, and that one way never allows for a truly integrative path. So the way to know if you are actually living a life of freedom or just enslaving yourself within this matrix is to think about what are the sources of your thought, your actions, and your behaviors. Are they authentic sources stemming from you and from your genuine intentions? Or are these sources connected to what somebody else has conceived of is the right way or the only way for you to express yourself? If you aren't able to pinpoint what is the authentic source of your own thinking and being, most likely you're choosing to derive meaning from the hive mind that you have learned to derive a sense of self from. And if that is the case, it may be very difficult for you to discern between your genuine truth and that which you were taught at some point in your life. You may not realize where you actually have the freedom to choose differently because you're so used to obeying a certain command that was once instilled in your mind. There's so many horror stories of what can go down in cults, such as severe as Jonestown, in which so many people end up taking the Kool-Aid simply because they're unable to see that they're ultimately causing their own death by choosing the route of group conformity. However, this cannot be made apparent to a soul that's already been absorbed in a hive mind, because at that point, there is no individual consciousness. These individuals are operating strictly through the lens of everybody else, and if that collective intention is to die, then to die will be the case, because there is no way to come out of a situation when that hive mind was already prioritized as the only solution. So why would anyone choose to operate in a hive mind way of thinking or being if these actions are ultimately dangerous, deceptive, and lead to complete obliteration of the self? Well, the simple reason why is because there's already been an obliteration of the self that happened in those people's lives. The starting point is a complete fear of vulnerability, a moment in which the self ceased to exist and someone chose to disassociate from who they really are. These can be moments in early childhood when somebody made you feel completely oppressed. And so when a later opportunity arises to idolize someone, such as a cult leader or a certain even model of belief, choosing to take that part of the belief or the leader as a part of yourself leads you to feel more whole. Beneath every single one of these distortional ways of thinking and being is an intention to achieve wholeness. However, the distortion is such that you think by attaching to the cult or to the hive mind, you're going to feel more whole. The way to tell ultimately that this is not the case is because you're going to realize that you need to feel more whole within yourself to not want the attachment in the first place. If any person, group, religion, ideology, or philosophy is not promoting of your connection to source being the way that you achieve personal freedom, then they're actually embodying a hive mind consciousness. If someone is deriving personal power or value from you connecting to them to feel an exalted sense of self, meanwhile taking your power for them, that is the same mechanism coming into play. The only teachings to trust that are not of this false light origin are those that promote your connection to your own soul, to the one soul that requires no fragmentation from itself, no distortion, no lies or deceptive ways, simply connection to truth and to a frequency of oneness that allows you to truly find resonance through everything that you choose to experience. This experience is very pure. It comes with no limits or restrictions because it's encouraging of you choosing to feel good about everything that you're doing, thinking, and feeling. In a world full of different agendas in which so many people, organizations, and institutions are trying to achieve something from the collective, we are subjected to a whole lot of conditional thinking and being. So many reasons why people want to tempt us to do certain things. And that's why it's increasingly more important to realize the difference between yourself and all of these different programs that exist in the world around us. Ultimately, claiming the power to enforce our own consciousness is what keeps us free from this conformity. And we're ultimately creating either the trap within our own consciousness that makes us vulnerable to all these different conditions, or we're choosing to see that our power cannot be revoked because we choose to make it so. So claim your power by realizing that you're choosing to operate as a sovereign entity, to realize that you have a God self within you connected to infinite knowing, which you need to embrace by choosing to feel the freedom in who you are, in what you believe, and in what you know is the right way for you to align with this power. This is something that cannot be taken from you unless you choose to give up your power to fully be.